My first EP, as I mentioned, was just a mess. It was horrible. My vocals were terrible. And my friend's band, they were called Y Intercept.
It's been 19 years in the making. Before I met you, could have been another 10. For all I care, I couldn't believe at first that you could possibly exist. You were just the thing I'd strive to find, but settle for the next best thing. I found you on.
They recorded an EP with this guy Matt Allison, who recorded Alkaline Trio and some other bands, and I was like so impressed with their stuff. I was like, I really have to up my game. So I got a job at Menards, which is kind of like a Lowe's or a Home Depot for those of you who know what those stores are like. Mm-hmm. And I spent all my paychecks on recording a full-length record. I was like, I'm going to make a radio viable record that'll just catch, people's ears and try to develop a fan base. Make a CD that doesn't suck. How about that? And so I send my CD to Courtney, my friend who, her boyfriend helps book the Fireside. And she emails me back, and she gives me a bunch of comparisons as to what she thinks it sounds like. And she was pretty cool. She's like, hey, I can probably get you on some shows, but before I try to get you some shows, you should try to start playing with some of these bands. And she lists off some bands, and I know all about these bands. They're like pop punk bands, on the North Shore and the Northwest Suburbs, and they were bands that like all of my friends that were in bands were making fun of, because they were doing like pop punk, and the bands that I was playing with were kind of doing more indie rock. So they were like, they would make fun of. They were like, I would never play a show with that band. You know what I mean? They were being like snobby about it.
Right.
And I thought it was kind of ridiculous, but I sort of bought into it. So I kind of steered clear of those bands. And one of those bands, one of the bands were called 504 Plan.
Now that all the smoke is clearing, the plan has been destroyed, and I'm back here in puddles of what was my moonlight. The only thing that kept me safe from tears and pictures of you ran through my head.
Who I would later go on to play with. And then another band she mentioned was called Fall Out Boy.
Last night I saw a movie and thought about many movies I've seen at your house. Excuse me if I'm rude, but I'd rather that we just drive from the wreck the ones I'd see again without you. Leaning on my shoulder, distracting me from the bloodline.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, Fall Out Boy. So she's like, Fall Out Boy, and I'm like, I've seen all these bands at the Knights of Columbus. They're really not that good. I'm not being a snob or anything, but they weren't that great. Not that my band was anything special at the time, but Fall Out Boy especially, they sounded like Saves the Day, but just way worse. I mean, they were a 5-piece at the time, and Patrick Stump really, he had a range, but he was singing very nasally and whiny, so I had no idea what was to come from him. This is 2002, so Warped Tour rolls around again, you know what I mean? I've just recorded this full-length record, and I go to Warped Tour with these 3-song samplers, like 3 most solid songs in my opinion off the album, just to like pass out to people. But here's the deal. You go into a concert, a CD can become a weapon. I mean, you can hand them out if you're like a vendor or a band that's playing, but you can't just bring things into a show like that. Like not at Tinley Park, So I had this plan, Dan.
Okay.
Hear me out. So
Man with a plan.
That's right. So my cousin, and I'm now back with that same girlfriend that we broke up, whatever.
Breaking up again, 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 breaking up again.
that girlfriend and my cousin, I had this plan. I said, okay, I've got 300 CDs. How about we buy a tampon box for each of you, like big ones, and you put them in your purses full of CDs, and you go through the line, and they won't even suspect a tampon box.
Tampax tampons, because special days should never be trusted to anything less.
It worked.
No way.
They snuck in 300 samplers in their purses between the two of them in tampon boxes into Warped Tour 2002 in the Chicago date. And I went...
Look at Undercover Sam. Sam was a handler.
So,
look at that.
Smuggler. Anyway, yeah, you're going to have to...
his secret operatives.
Call customs on me. At the time, there was this record label called Drive Thru Records. And I was not a huge fan of Drive Thru Records. The bands were very pop punky. I was more into the Vagrant type of scene where it was more indie rock based, which again, these terms are very vague. I basically hand out to like every band on Drive Thru, because that band 504 Plan's playing the stage or the Drive Thru stage, and so is this band August Premiere that's on the same label that 504 Plan is, because the guy who owns that label is friends with some of the people at Drive Thru. And so I'm going around handing out these samplers to people with like Get Up Kids t-shirts, any t-shirt that might sound like my band or might be a band that I'm influenced by. And then there's this band called Something Corporate at the time, and I hand a CD off I didn't even know who I was handing it to. I don't know all these dudes. I thought it was just a merch dude. So I give him one, not thinking about anything, and wouldn't you know, like 3 weeks later, after that Warped Tour, I get an email while I'm in Columbus, Ohio, visiting that girlfriend, and it's from the guitarist from Something Corporate, and they're having a lot of success on their first record, and they're signing to Geffen, from Drive Thru to Geffen, like an upstream deal. And he's like, hey, I have this like indie label that I'm starting called Random Play Music, and I really like these 3 songs. Can you send me the whole album? And I'm like, no way. Like, this could be my break, you know? So I send it out, and during this time period, while I'm waiting to hear back from him, check this out. This band, August Premiere, and the band Fall Out Boy both get signed to Fueled by Ramen, this label that I like loved, which this band, The Stereo I Loved, was on, as I had mentioned. This other band that is in the scene called Spitalfield signs to Victory. This other band called the Red Hot Valentines from like Urbana signs to Polyvinyl, which is another label that I love. This band called Plain White Tees signs to Fearless Records.
There's no need to argue. You think you're always right. I won't even bother. It's just another fight. You always have it your way, but someday you'll see it's not about how much you pay. Daddy's gonna buy you the world, cause that's what you want.
And as well, prior to all those bands, there was this band called Knockout. That actually was on Fearless Records before any of these bands were signed, which pretty much started that whole pop punk scene in the northwest suburbs, or at least like had a following. But anyways, I'm just saying that because our scene was just starting to kind of take shape and blow up, the next generation, if you will. So it was very exciting, and I'm like, wow, I'm talking to this dude from a band that's on Drive Thru Records. Like, this is promising. He basically sends me back an email. He says, I really like those 3 songs, but the rest of the record's kind of predictable. So, like, my heart shattered. And I didn't give up. I wouldn't give up, but...
Now, Sam, this is the first time you tried to get a label to back you, right? I think. Am I following correctly?
Yeah, well, we're searching for, like, an indie label.
Okay.
But it's a thin line because a lot of indie labels distribute through major labels, etc., or have upstream deals. And I'm not going to get into all the music stuff, like as far as contractual obligations and all that, because I never really actually had to sign a contract in my life for any type of deal. It was like a handshake type of deal on all the labels that I was on. Basically, I send this CD to this girl who had reviewed our first EP and just like slaughtered the EP. Just like the first like opening review like line was, Midwest Blue is the epitome of a novice band. It doesn't get any better as she goes along. So I send it to her to try to kind of woo her and this zine back. And wouldn't you know, she emails me back and like loves our album. She's like, you should send it to this brand new radio station that's kind of trying to replace Q101, which was like the big station at the time for alternative music. They have this contest for like the next big thing. And basically what it is like you send your demo and it's like a battle of the bands. Well, wouldn't you know, they're picking 12 bands and our band makes it. And we get to play the Hard Rock Cafe. And like, dude, this is like back in 2002. So, I mean, I'm like 18, 19. I think I was like 19 at the time. And we play this show. We didn't win or anything, but it was cool, another one of those kind of things that gives you some confidence. And I went to a show after that, and I had all these samplers left over that we had made that we didn't hand out at Hard Rock. I went to go see a band called Hey Mercedes that I liked a lot. And I met this dude. He's like, oh yeah, I got a label and I live in Florida and blah, blah, blah. And no. And he's like, oh, I'll definitely check this out. I'm like, we're kind of like Hey Mercedes, but like poppier and blah, blah, blah. Kind of listed off my influences. And he emails me like 2 weeks later and he's like, I want to put this album out. Like, I haven't heard the whole thing, but I already know I want to put it out. So send me the whole thing. And I want to put your band out. And we were like the first signees to this label. And that was a really positive experience. I did want to meet them. I just felt like if I didn't go hang out with them and like kind of convey like what my goals were, then it was just kind of this phone relationship, an email relationship. And I wanted to have a connection with them. So for my 20th birthday, I flew out there to Orlando. That's where they were at. And met Jason, the owner of this label. Really cool dude. He really did take a shot on us. He actually spent a lot of money on a lot of different bands and didn't really make anything from it in the end. I kind of feel bad the way things ended too, because we wanted more. If we would have stuck with him, we probably would have seen more success than we did with some of the other choices that we made, even though some of the other choices we made were with labels that were more notable. And I still feel a little bit bad about that, but hey, everything happens for a reason, right?